think Iron Man's in for a shock when he has to deal with the expert in electromagnetism. Here's your look at the brand new Diamond Select, Marvel Select Crimson Dynamo Collector's Action Figure with accessories. Though many have donned the iconic armor of the Crimson Dynamo, no man has borne the mantle longer than Dmitry Bukharin. Originally suiting up during the Soviet era at the behest of the KGB, Bukharin's allegiances and affiliations have changed numerous times, having acted as both enemy and ally to his longtime American counterpart, Iron Man. The Crimson Dynamo has most recently served as Motherland as member of the heroic Winter Guard. Thanks to Dmitry's recent dealings with Diamond Select, means we can finally get ourselves a Crimson Dynamo to go on display with the earlier looked at Titanium Man. Speaking of Titanium Man, I'll be bringing him in a second for size comparisons. Crimson Dynamo isn't going to be as tall as Titanium Man, but the figure looks fantastic along with him. The figure is going to stand at about 7.5 inches in height, or Crimson Dynamo is going to be 19 centimeters tall. Speaking of Titanium Man, let's bring the figure in right now and dwarf the Crimson Dynamo. There's definitely a size difference between the two, but this also does remind me of one thing about Diamond that they do so well. When they release their Marvel Select figures, it doesn't matter whether they're big or tall, short or small, they're all going to be the same price. So yes, sometimes it means that you might pay the same price for a slightly smaller figure, but when it comes to the big boys like Titanium Man, you're just going to pay the same price as you would for Crimson Dynamo. And I respect that. It's not a case where they ever feel the need to build a figure in a wave where you have to build a larger figure like Titanium Man. And if it was a Marvel Legends release of Titanium Man, you got to believe he'd be a lot more expensive than regular Marvel Legends releases. Also, for Iron Man comparisons, I wanted to bring in the Silver Centurion. Always been kind of like one of my favorite. It's sort of a charming thing about the larger shoulder pads for Silver Centurion. And in this case, he's also smaller than Crimson Dynamo. Thanks to Diamond Select, Dmitry does get packed with quite a lot of things. The less interesting of things is the fact he comes with some interchangeable hands. Right now, and probably the least of interesting things, is the fact the figure does have closed fists on the ends of his forearms. That will, though, change quickly, as the figure also comes include gripping hands. It's weird to look at gripping hands because you automatically assume that the figure's going to come with other accessories for them to hold, and yet Crimson Dynamo doesn't come include with anything else. I don't know why they necessarily included hands like this, but again, I always appreciate that they include extra things like this. Colors like this with a sort of copperish penny color will be consistent, I would say normally from head to toe, but obviously he's unhelmeted right now. That's going to be changing shortly. If you wanted to change these hands, it's very simple, a case of just removing the hands like you're milking a cow from either forearm and replacing those out quickly. He also comes included with some relaxed hands too. And obviously, I just finished talking about changing out the hands. I want to show you how easy those hands are to change. Just hold onto the forearm, easily yank those off. I mean, look at the size of the small peg. Very easy to change. And then we're just going to find the suitable hand with the thumb facing inward, and we're just going to change that out accordingly. I'm also going to be changing out very shortly as well, because the figure also comes included with relaxed hands that are actually firing off a projection. These little additional energy pieces are actually done successfully and very effectively with a translucent red plastic. They're fairly hard, in fact. I actually thought they'd be a little bit softer than what they would actually be. But you can see they have them extended out from the ends of his fingertips. And again, it's just a case of changing out the hands by, we already did this. We're just going to remove the hand once again. I'll do it on one side because I've already done the relaxed hand on the other. It's not just to show you as well that, you don't have to necessarily have the figure always displayed with all of the energy effects. Sometimes it does get a little too busy. It's also going to get quite a lot busier as well, because the figure does come included with already an unhelmeted head sculpt. It's a crime, in fact, that a head sculpt has to be this good. I'm just going to want to bring in the unhelmeted head for Titanium Man, which was fine, but I always like to display, again, my Iron Man baddies with helmets. If they're a character that has a helmet and a suit of armor, I always like to display them head to toe with armor instead. I didn't mind actually as much putting this one away in the bag. It was a fine, okay head sculpt, but for this one, I almost feel kind of bad. I'm putting this away in a bag with all the other remaining accessories, because I think the head sculpt's too good to not put on the figure's body in the first place. I do like the way they've sculpted the beard. I like the additional gray that they've added to the bottom of this, and even like the curlier mustache. If I wasn't, say, using this for Crimson Dynamo, I'd like to find maybe a suitably sized figure that I could display this with. If you had like an Ironmonger, I think that would be an ideal head sculpt to use with an Ironmonger instead. But for what it is, as good as it may be, I mean, ultimately my end goal is still to display the figure with a helmet instead. And he gets one helmet, but he has 3 different ways to display it. I'm not hopefully speaking in riddles. He gets this one first that has 2 eyes and then slots in the front for his mouth, which is a good looking head for Crimson Dynamo. I, though, prefer this faceplate instead. It still keeps the slots in the front, but what it does then is it trades the eyes on the front for a singular visor instead. Just when I think of Crimson Dynamo, I tend to think of this look personally. And this is actually just an easy case. Instead of actually giving us multiple heads where you'd have to remove them every single time, the easiest thing and most effective way of doing this is that they just made it replaceable. You just take the plates off. There's a peg on either side, and those slot into the side slots there, and then you just change it out with the faceplate that you want to use. You want to just make sure that you're pushing it in enough that you feel it locks in place, because there's been a couple of times that I've moved the figure's head around, for example, and the visor then pops off. But I really like this head sculpt. Of the 3 faceplates, I mean, obviously this one here has the blast effect. I really like this one the most. Then obviously, having already mentioned it, the blast effect he also comes included with happens to use the same visor faceplate, although now it's projecting out energy at the front. We already have a Cyclops from Marvel Select, but if they did another one following up later on, I would love to see them do a very similar effect. I mean, look how good this looks with the optic blast for Cyclops. I think that would work really, really well. I mean, you can see the way it comes out the middle visor, or the top visor there of the faceplate. And again, just to change that out, just removing it, and then you just replace it just like that. I don't know when it comes to displaying these if I'm going to go with the firing effects on both the hands and also doing from the top of his head. I feel like it's a little excessive, maybe a little excessive. But if you did want to see what that looks like, what I'm going to do first, I'm going to remove this, because there's been a couple of times that if I went to try to remove the head, I just find it's a lot easier to take the faceplates off first. So what we're going to do, as good as this head may be, and reluctant I am to remove it, we're just going to detach the head from the ball post. It's not the easiest thing to do the first time you get this figure. I actually had to heat this up a little bit with hot water. And then we're going to go ahead and replace it with this one, which again, I find it's easier to change the faceplate after you've put the head in place. And again, you just put that onto the ball joint. With now that in place, just to show you again the variations that we can go through, we'll go back to the beginning. So again, you got the 2 eyes, and again, you've got the little slots there on the front of his face. Good looking head. And then, just to go back to my favorite of the 3, you have again the visor, same mouth, different eyes. Well, if you would want to call this eyes, again, you got the little slot there on the top. Definitely my favorite of the 3. And if you want to see what it looks like with the blast effect, it's almost like I'm doing an infomercial here. We'll just plug that in place. Now, again, like as good as that looks, I feel like having 3 of these, one on either hand and then one out the middle, might be a little bit too excessive. So what I might just do, if I want to display this guy in a more dynamic, more interesting pose, might just change it out for a relaxed pair of hands. Just pop that in place. Bend the arms just a little bit. Maybe even like bend the legs and have the figure displayed like that. I think that would look really cool as well. But for at least the purpose of, obviously we're going to look at the articulation on the figure, so it might be a little bit easier just to replace it back, default it back to a regular visor. And again, like the consistency of color, we've got this really nice metallic copper color here. It's everywhere, head to toe, top to bottom, front to back. Interesting thing about the back of Crimson Dynamo is that you'll see there's a very obvious hole there. This hole doesn't serve any purpose at all with him, but I would imagine it probably serves a purpose with the figure down the road. Obviously, he has the large cups on the side. They actually kind of remind me of Reese's peanut butter cups. Obviously, the cups on the peanut butters would be black, but it kind of reminds me very similar to that. It's kind of these little cog wheels that he has on the sides. What they smartly did was, if you look at it, it's not consistently a circle all the way around. It sure spins, but they also put a little gap space down below here, so not only can his arm sit flush against his body, but also if you wanted to bring him forward, for example, he does have, again, like that little, it's not a case where like his arm has to sit further out here just to clear this part of his shoulder. There's a little cut in there as well. So again, it keeps it pretty close to his body. Nice detail overall. I mean, there's really not a lot of paint happening. I think where he's executed better is just with the sculpting, because if you're familiar with Crimson Dynamo, kind of this is the color scheme that you expect to see. There's really not a lot of other things get thrown onto this figure, but like the coloring of the plastic they use is really quite good. Now, for the articulation on this guy, back to his head is going to be on a ball joint. You may have already seen the fact that there's a post at the top, well, there's a post in the middle, and there's a ball joint at the top, ball joint at the bottom. So in between the two, he does have quite the range of motion. You can move the head back and forth, up and down. Really, you could rotate the head all the way around. These shoulders work in such a smart way in that they rotate. Well, first of all, when you rotate the arms, you can rotate this joint as well. So you can rotate everything together. The arms come out easily at 90 degrees. There is no necessarily swivel. Well, there's a swivel here on his bicep, but when you are like rotating the arm, for example, like I said, you're just going to rotate all of this together. But he has a swivel there in his bicep, single hinge only in his elbow, but it allows at least the forearm to rotate. Of course, you got your hand rotation all the way around, all that fun stuff, hinging back and forth. And then when you get to the torso, the thing about the torso is, even though it's kind of really hard to see, if you bring the torso as far back as you can get it, you can see like they didn't cheat things at all. I mean, because if you're looking at it straight flush forward like this, you'd only see like this part of his abdomen. So you would think that they cut off the sculpting from that point on and it would just be completely flat. But Diamond finished it all the way up. So if you happen to angle Crimson Dynamo further back like this, you can see that they still have finished the rest of the abdomen underneath that. Really nice attention to detail. Upper torso is going to be on that ball joint. You got the lower torso ball joint that does also rotate here as well. And he also has a rotation here in his belt, or I guess where his belt would be. Angles, his legs do angle outward. They're on ball joints. Once again, you can take the legs and move forward, move them back. He has a swivel, although it's really tight here on the thigh, but it does at least allow the leg to move back and forth. He has only just a single hinge on the knee. Not that I really necessarily needed double hinges. I don't think the figure necessarily, I mean, when you have a figure this size, is it really important that you're going to get a double hinge? I don't feel it's necessary. I mean, I think where the value of a figure like this is the size and just the amount of plastic that they put into him, that by sacrificing a double hinge on the knee, it's not going to bother me at all. He has no articulation here, although I would have thought that this would be a part that would swivel back and forth, but it's not the case. He does still, though, have ankle pivot. That moves back and forth. You can also ankle rock it. And in case you were curious, the figure does have peg holes on the undersides of his feet. Again, if anything, I only feel just a little bit bad because Diamond put so much work into the alternate head sculpt here that ultimately I'm just going to be putting it back in the bag. I really do want to use this for something, but I just can't think of what. What I will, though, ultimately be doing is displaying this guy on the shelf. If I just pull back, bring back in my Titanium Man. You know, Crimson Dynamo looks really good with Titanium Man. Keeping, again, like basic colors. I don't think that Diamond really needed to land a lot of additional paint applications on him. Just relying on the plastic for two characters like this is more than enough. Crimson Dynamo being a little bit smaller, a lot smaller, actually, than Titanium Man. The two figures really will look good on a shelf together. Perhaps a compromise is in order when it comes to displaying Crimson Dynamo. I like the blast effects that he has on the ends of his fingers. I also like the one that he has coming out from his visor. But I think to have all three, just my own personal preference, I think it's maybe a little bit too much. Unfortunately, the hardest thing when it comes to Diamond Select Marvel releases is that they include so many good accessories. For me, like Dimitri's head sculpt being as good as it was, it pains me to have to put that away in a bag with all the rest of his remaining accessories, just because, unfortunately, I already got Titanium Man displayed from head to toe in his armor. And when it comes to Crimson Dynamo, no pun intended, I'd like to follow suit. Now, what do you guys think of Crimson Dynamo? Let me know down below in the comments section. By the way, FYI 411, this guy is available right now online or in comic book stores. So if you guys are wanting to beef up your bad guys for Iron Man, like I said, he is available right now. Big thank you once again to the folks over at Diamond Select that did provide this sample of the Marvel Select Crimson Dynamo that we could have a look at in this review. For your video question for today, as I throw out to you, the viewing audience, who's your favorite bad guy for Iron Man? Is it perhaps Crimson Dynamo? Is it Titanium Man? Or is it somebody else? Let me know down below. In the meantime, if you guys did enjoy this video, I want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and you'd like to see some more, not only, I can tell you, by the way, FYI, we are going to be looking at some more Marvel Select, but I also have a pile of things from Diamond Select that we will be looking at through the various reviews upcoming. So making sure that you're hitting that subscribe, making sure you turn on the bell notification, but the most important thing is that you're coming back regularly. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.